Quick context on Beth for those of you guys that don't know her. She was former vice chair of GE. She spent 25 years leading their effort to accelerate new growth. She built GE's business innovations in GE Ventures, which develops new businesses, and oversaw the reinvention of GE Lighting. She was named GE's CMO in 2003. She served as president of integrated media at NBCUniversal from 2006 to 2008. Overseeing the company's digital efforts, including the early formation of Hulu. She's a director at Nike, and she's been written about and profiled extensively from New York Times, the Forbes, the Fortune, the Fast Company, and she's been named to the Fortune and Forbes list of the world's most powerful women. You guys help me welcome Beth Comstock. We're going to do 30 minutes of content, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So typically people ask a couple different questions, and I'm hoping you guys, we can keep it going for a little bit. So as we're going along, please be thinking about some questions that you can ask. I have a couple of books behind me that Beth brought, so if you ask a really good question, I'll give you a book. And yeah, let's dive in. So you've been on a pretty incredible journey. Like reading your book, I was struck on some of the early steps you took, because you basically wanted to change the trajectory you were on and started thinking about how do I give myself permission to take bold new steps. And I'd love to hear, as you think back kind of to those first early steps, what was one or two of those steps you took, and how did that change you and start to shape you as you thought about things?
Yeah, well, I think this notion of giving yourself permission is at the heart of why I wrote the book. I would go every month to our training and learning center an hour from here, and I'd meet with people early in mid-career, and a lot of people had alibis of why they couldn't make change happen. The boss wouldn't let them, they didn't have enough money, investors, all the things we all know. But what I realized talking to them was that they were afraid, and they were looking for alibis for why they couldn't do it. And I recognized especially that in me. And so I felt it was very important to kind of share some of those stories. And for me, I think it was one, just kind of when you see that change has to happen, you've got to take ownership of it. I share in the book a very personal story of being in my mid-20s and getting a divorce as a young mother. I had a young baby, was married, had a young baby, and divorced in my mid-20s, and kind of sort of giving myself permission to say there's a different story I want my life to be. That was a very big one for me. And then there were smaller ones for me of just, I'm shy, I'm introverted, less so now, but I was often holding myself back. I wasn't putting myself out there. I wasn't asking questions. I wasn't raising my hand for things, and I just realized I was holding myself back from opportunities. So those things I think are quite relatable. We all have those moments. Maybe not everybody here is shy or introverted, but there are those moments when you realize I'm not getting things going, but really it's up to me, and I can't blame someone else for that.
Right. That's great. And then, as I was reflecting on your journey, not only starting kind of early taking those steps, but if you kind of reflect on your career, it feels like you got into a rhythm of big step after big step, and I think it was really cool to see, and maybe you meant it to be this way in the book, but your wisdom, your experience, your courage, your capacity to take on bigger challenges grew because you took those early steps. And curious, if your mindset of persistent, maybe two-part question of persistently putting yourself out there to take on those challenges, but then the capacity to also learn and grow through the peaks and through some of the tough times as well. Talk about that.
I mean, for one, I just tell you, especially earlier in my career, I'm ambitious. And so that was often at odds with some of the other things I mentioned. Someone who lacked confidence or felt awkward or shy about going forward in things. Those were often at odds. And I love this is courageous minds. I mean, for me, it was a lot of summoning that courage. When I didn't have confidence, I would find courage help me get the confidence. So I'd have to sort of give myself these challenges, just small challenges to go forward. And it built a tenacity. I mean, for me, I think what I learned to love is just I'm a curious person. That was the way I got out of those things. I'm curious, so I'm in my head worrying about everything, or I can be out there exploring and being curious. And that gave me a certain confidence, especially as I started working in different jobs and companies, because I'd see things out there. Most of my colleagues were focused inside, and it was easy for me to look outside because no one else was. And that gave me a confidence to be like, no, like those patterns are real. I've seen that. That clean tech future is coming. And that, it wasn't about my idea, it wasn't about me, it wasn't about me being awkward, it was about me helping see things because I spent time outside. So that built a certain confidence in myself. And so though, and you start to try a few things and they work out, it gives you a little bit more confidence. But I would say for me, I really wandered around for the first 10 to 12 years of my career, professional life, trying to figure out what was right. And then things just started to click, but it was that kind of embracing the curiosity that I think was my kind of aha.
Is there anything you did intentionally in terms of reflecting on when things went well or didn't that you were able to learn from? Because it does feel like your capacity and ability to take on bigger and bigger challenges grew as you went through it. Or is it just the fact that you kept putting yourself out there and kept going after things?
I think it was, it was a number of things, but it was at the end that this tenacity that I tapped into that I frankly didn't know I had. Really early in my career, I wanted to be a journalist, and I wasn't very good, and I wasn't very confident. And I remember sending this video, my tape, as such as it was, to this news director and I called him every day. It was in Richmond, Virginia. I called him every day, and he never took my call. And finally, he took my call, and he's like, "Would you stop calling me? I'm never going to hire you. First of all, why would anyone who looks like you look like you're 12 years old? I'm never going to hire you." And but he had to hand it to me. I called him every day. And, it was a failure because he's like, "I'm never going to hire you," but it brought this tenacity out of me. And I think I've just seen that replicate. I fast forward several decades when I was working at NBC, finally, and the last time I was at NBC, I remember one colleague, she looked at me and she goes, "You just don't give up, do you?" And she didn't mean it in a very positive way. But I was like, "No, I don't." And I think most of you here are in these corporate innovation roles, and you're here doing what you do. It's because you see something, you see an opportunity, and if you're not tenacious, it forces you to be that way. So that's where I had to find that in myself somewhat.
I think a lot of the group here is in innovation and growth. It's the future of the company. They're external, you're naturally external, focused, you're curious. What were the things that you reflect back on your career, the things that you did, whether it's disciplines or the things that allowed you to stay externally connected and to be able to start to see and anticipate where things were going? Because it's so easy to get just back to the day-to-day grind. You're not putting yourself out there. But just
I did that too. I'm actually these days, I've left you a year ago, so I'm on a bit of an anti-optimization kick these days because if we had met in early 2017, if I had a chance to talk to any of you individually, I'd say, "How are you doing? What are you up to?" But then I'd say, what are your productivity tips? How are you getting more out of your day? And I realized how addictive that is. Yet I felt like my path in the company I was in was twofold. One was to be this kind of outsider inside. And I think most of you here, hopefully you identify with this kind of role, the one that's always finding those trends and seeing the change early. So you have enough of that outside perspective, but you have to translate it back inside. So you have to speak the language they speak. It has to, why do I care about blockchain? Why do I care? I make locomotives. Why do I care? So you have to have that translator role. But then I had to put myself out there, and back to the curiosity, kind of make room for discovery became a bit of my mantra. I've got to get out there. In the early days, I think my mistake was, or what I had to learn was, it wasn't enough that I was just out there. Maybe some of you can recognize this, but you go out and you're like, before you know it, you're the one chasing the shiny new thing. And you're always like, "I saw this new thing," and you're kind of a know-it-all. And people are like, "Shut up, I don't have to listen to you. What do you know about blockchain?" And so I had to realize I had to bring in outsiders, a lot of spark, what I call sparks, the people Will you bring in, that's why you have a business, right? To bring in outsiders to spark perspective, to help you get outside yourself, because people be like, what expertise do you have? None, right? I was kind of the golden retriever of the company. I had to go fetch and bring it back, and then I had to create the mechanisms. And then from there it grew to kind of organize field trips where we do the discovery and serendipity together. It could be something as simple as a Friday field trip with a team where we go and look at a new retail concept like Story or something else, or it would be something more organized where I remember taking a group of top tier executives to Israel and made them sleep for 2 weeks in military barracks in Israel to learn about non-hierarchical learning. Like I could tell them, I could bring in an Israeli general, but until they saw it, they weren't going to change. So over time, I think that kind of discovery, translation, I realized my job was to maintain this balance of outside, inside, but to create a surround sound of change. Because everybody had to find their own way there. And I had to force them to discover because no one wants to do this. They're always like, that's frivolous, who has time for that? I got a quarter to make, this is all extraneous. And so in the end, for me, I kind of, this framework, I'd be like, okay, I guarantee you have 10% of your time that's wasted on stuff you already know the answer to. In meetings, you already know the outcome. Just checkers, checking, checkers. Can you take that 10% and turn it into discovery, into figuring out what's new and next? So that became a bit of a kind of counter argument I could leverage. I guarantee you got 10% of your time wasted. Let's take that and go discover. And so those were some of the tricks I tried to incorporate over time.
How were you able to then have conviction to say, hey, these are the areas we need to be playing in, and then drive it to action, with testing ideas or like taking it beyond just the field trip and driving it into action for the business?
Well, it was twofold. There's nothing like the power of, because the boss said so, and I would say I learned to use that sparingly as I got wiser and more mature in my innovation career. But key initiatives, and we're all going to do this, still work in big organizations. I remember one of my early learnings, and that was we created something called Imagination Breakthroughs, and it was just a protected class of ideas. These were market back. The journey I was on to fight for marketing being market development and market back in a company that was really good at technology development from the inside out, we had to create some tension. We created these protected class of ideas, a bit of funding for them, but people had to self-fund and kind of made it mandatory. So you had to do some of those kind of tools to make it happen. And then you had to create the mechanisms and the tools that people could come in and say, yeah, but I know the aviation business better than you do. So I'm going to come in and pitch a, air taxi and see it through and we had to kind of fight for this. My job ultimately became fighting for the space, the resources, sparking the questions, but ultimately they had to own it at the business unit. They had to believe it was going to make their business better. I was just the catalyst. And so if it was about my idea or me giving them the idea, that wouldn't work. I could create the framework and say, you must protect some ideas. Hey, those aren't good enough. Hey, are you trying more? But ultimately, they had to be the ones saying, yeah, air taxi is our future. If I told them air taxi, they wouldn't have done it.
Shifting gears a little bit, so I think most people in the room, if they're doing anything big and going after it, they're facing some kind of adversity, challenge, etc., right? Like,
and no one does these jobs because they're easy.
Yeah, not easy at all.
And you
right?
might be wondering, like, why am I doing these? It took me writing a 400-page book, I'm sorry, I read a lot of pages, to go, like, I really like the struggle.
Yeah.
I really like the struggle.
What, if you kind of reflect on times like with Echo Imagination, you're like in the minority on driving that forward. With iVillage, obviously there's a lot of learnings you're able to pay forward, and the Hulu and other things. But like, when you faced adversity, like what helped you to be resilient? What gave you hope? Whether you failed or it's like you're learning and paying it forward, or you know with conviction you're right, but the rest of the organization isn't there, and that's a little bit of a struggle. Like what gave you help and resilience in those moments?
Well, there were a lot of times I was totally panicked and about to give up, and I had this sort of pattern recognition that I realized after a while, like, if you press too hard for something, it maybe won't happen. And just when you give up, just when you're like, okay, you're on your own, figure it out, people are like, you know that idea? I'm really into that. So sometimes you can push too hard, is one of those messages, and I had to learn that. But it's back to what we're saying, like, just, you see the patterns. It's not like my idea, you just see it. You spend enough time in discovery and talking to people and understanding it. And the other thing is just, and perhaps it's my background, for me it was just the power of story. And the power of, to me, strategy is story, and strategy is a story well told. And it's creating a vision and a story. Do you see where this is going? And I believe that story. So it's easy to tell it because I believed it, but it wasn't enough that I had to see it. Other people had to make that story their own. So if you have enough people who are signing up for this story, you're shaping that future. You're making it. And so with that momentum, like, you have an obligation to each other. Like, you see it, right? I see it. Yeah, we gotta go. So that, I think, really gave me the fortitude to just, it wasn't me, it was a team. We believed in that story. I don't know if any of you have read Yuval Harari's *Sapiens* or any of his work, but in *Sapiens* he talks about imagined realities, and kind of why I named my book *Imagine It Forward* was just this ability to harness story and the power of imagination to imagine and shape the future. That's innately human. We do that, but in companies we forget that sometimes. It's all just the logic and the numbers. And so that's really, I think, when I reflect on it, it was the power and the belief of that imagined future, and we were going to make it real. Eco-imagination. I remember we did, in the early days, it started with Jeff Immelt, who was the CEO and chairman of GE, and he was out. The good thing about GE is we were in so many industries at the time. You've got, in jobs like mine, you had instant pattern recognition. You could see where things were alike. And Jeff was hearing from different customers, hey, we're seeing regulation happening in Europe in clean tech, and he was hearing it, and help us, GE, can you help us? And so he said, what's here? Can you take these seeds of an idea and see what's happening? And we had a small pickup team that went deep in discovery, but it wasn't until we started dreaming with a core set of customers, and we actually did a whole dreaming session. It became a way we worked. We peered out in the future. We said, at the time it was 2005, we said, peer out in 2015, imagine 10 years from now, so quaint. But the fact that we dreamed with our customers, and we kind of gave them virtual currency. We weren't smart enough to give them Bitcoin, but it was, if you had $1 million of GE's investment money for technology, where would you place it? And so we dreamed together. So again, we created that imagined reality. It was solar, it was wind, it was storage, and together we wanted to invest in that. It was really powerful.
But it was the dreaming with customers that gave you conviction to stay with it. Because in the book, like, you talk about, like, there wasn't a lot of internal buy-in and support for it early, and you were the one that batted heavy for it.
There wasn't a lot. I remember Jeff Immelt told the New York Times at one point, after it was successful, he said, at one point there were two of us who thought it was a good idea. I was always grateful that he was the other one. But I remember one of the toughest sell for me, I was in sales and marketing, and the toughest sell was the salespeople, because they were petrified. We were ahead of most of our customers, and most of you, this is what happens when you innovate, and there's always the alibi. That's another great alibi. Our customers will never go for this. Yeah. And it's about segmentation, it's about asking the right customers. We had one customer who pulled his energy contract worth $100 million. Jeff Immelt never told me or the development team that happened. Because he knew, and I give him a lot of credit for that, it would have been easy for him to go, this was a dumb idea, it gave the sales team validation, he didn't tell us about it. Keep going, keep going. It was only, honestly, like 5 years later that I learned that we lost that big account. And again, I think it was that kind, he knew we had enough momentum, we had talked to enough other customers, but there's always going to be that tension of, no, you can't do that.
It's interesting on the senior leadership question, Jeff, from a data perspective, like there's a lot of data that says like senior leaders aren't supportive of like innovation and growth, or if they are, they don't understand like early testing of ideas and sensing where things are going. And he obviously did. And
yes and no.
You went to that. What are some of the things that he did that leaders could learn from, though, in terms of that gave him the conviction to say, no, we need to push in this area? Were there things that he did with his time and talking about being in front of customers?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, he was a customer fanatic. He came out sales and marketing, and he would go anywhere, anytime for a customer. I saw this guy fly 20 hours for like an hour customer meeting to close a deal. So that, and again, that sort of pattern recognition of getting out there and saying, let's explore this. And I was kind of the person, like, he would always be like, here's a seed of an idea, what are we gonna do? So that was, I think that just that curiosity. He always made himself available to any new idea or spark we'd bring in. He was open to those kinds of things. He let me bring in a lot of quote weirdos to kind of challenge the way he thought. And I worked with other people who wouldn't have had that tolerance for it. Now, it took a while for him to trust me that I was onto something. I'd say what we didn't do well, and I think he and other, maybe you guys will recognize this, big companies, we throw too much money at things too early. So I wish we had learned our kind of lean, test and learn, minimally viable product mindset a lot earlier. We would have gotten a lot farther. And so I think a lot of big companies, your CEOs may be very bold. Jeff was incredibly bold. He was a great champion for me and people like me. But his boldness sometimes meant let's just throw a lot of money at something. Because if we put more money and we'll get there faster. And we all know that's not always the case. It's about trying things until you build confidence, and then you're going to put the money into it. So we unfortunately had to write quite a few things off where we might have done it differently in a more test and learn approach. It's a balancing act, though.
You obviously have courage. You've been on this journey. Like, imagine you've had incredible teams that have worked for you over the years. Like, how are you able to take kind of that change agent, courageous mind, kind of friendly attitude, and empower your teams with that, so that they felt like they were empowered and permission to go out and test ideas and things? Like, how were you able to start to build that into the team?
Well, I think like later me versus earlier me, you would have seen a big change in that. I think early me, I was still very micromanaging and trying to figure out my leadership style. I think that for me a pivotal moment was just wanting to ask for help, and I remember getting some really important feedback just as I was about to be named Chief Marketing Officer, and my colleagues were like, you come in with a perfect idea and everything done and you don't ask for help, and we don't like that. So basically, change your way, sister, you're not going to be doing this. And so I had to really learn to ask for help. And so it was a pivotal moment for me, and the art of collaboration and the role of feedback and the role of us doing these things together, I just had to totally shift my mindset. And so I think it's just shaped my view. I feel incredibly passionately right now that none of us really manage much. We certainly don't manage people. We don't control people. We don't really manage change. The best we can do is have a vision, fight for space, resources, room to grow, encourage, coach, empower, and that was hopefully over time and a lot of good collaboration what I've learned to do. But that tenacity, I fought for our budget. I'm really proud, and when colleagues would come in and be like, Jeff said no, I'd be like, well, he said not yet. I heard him say not yet. I had a 3-time rule with him. Sometimes it was a 6-time. One time it was a 6-year rule. And I saw so many colleagues. This was C-suite to just starting out. They come in to pitch an idea or pitch money. They get told no, and you never hear from them again. Never. And like, but I thought you thought that was a good idea. So that, I think, helped the teams I worked with. It's not like I'm bold or particularly courageous, but I believed in that idea. And I think they saw me push back and go, well, no, we're going to come back. We're going back. What do you mean that you're giving up? We're going back. So I think that helped them realize we were in it together.
One question, and then we'll open it up. So if you guys want to start thinking about questions. I loved the story of Hulu in terms of how you fought for that early and fought for the right team. It was interesting in terms of seeing the iVillage acquisition play out and then lessons learned paying it forward. So, like, curious, like, as you think about, like, what did you learn when you're in the digital space and the iVillage thing? Like, what did you learn from that? But then, what enabled Hulu to be successful and to develop that early? You talk about like protecting ideas, disruptive ideas from the practices of the parent company, and would just love to hear that. Partly on, everybody talks about learning from failure. You've done it throughout your whole career, so I think the iVillage example is great. But then also, what led to enabling Hulu to be so successful?
Yeah, I almost called my book Fail Forward. My editor didn't like it as much as I did, but I believe that it's important. I mean, you guys are here. I know you. Hopefully, you believe it too. But so just to set the stage, I've been chief marketing officer. We launched Eco Imagination at GE. They're like, oh, she likes change. She can do this stuff. There's digital rising in media. You go back to NBC and figure it out. I'd been at NBC, but anyway, let me set the stage. So it's about 2006, YouTube was just emerging. And the mood at NBC and traditional media was equal parts humorous and petrified. Humorous, and perhaps you can relate to this, but humorous like, ha ha ha, cats playing the piano on video, that is just so cute. Like, that is so cute. That's so charming. Ha ha ha. And then it was like, oh my God, total panic. We don't know how to make videos with cats playing the piano. What if this takes off? So that was kind of the environment. So everybody rushed into doing things. News Corp bought MySpace, big play. We were panicked. I came in 6 weeks in. We're like, we're going to buy iVillage. It was a beautiful strategy. I sometimes think it could have been Facebook. It was about women and community. We wanted to marry with the TV properties. The problem was, what often happens, it was a very expensive acquisition, probably way too expensive. It was old technology, but really the antibodies of the company, NBC, killed it. Everybody started to say, but I can do this better. I want to do this. I want to create my own version of iVillage. I'm not going to support you. I'm going to do this. And it ended up being a free-for-all. We ended up, the lawyers got involved. They wanted to move it to New Jersey for tax savings. We basically lost 50% of the staff when we moved to these beautiful offices that no one could work in because there was no staff. We basically almost killed it. So it was not a good situation. And you see that and you're so frustrated because you're like, what could have been? Just not. And so we still didn't give up on the cats playing the piano. Google ended up buying YouTube, made us more panicked. MySpace cratered at Fox too. They did the same thing we did at NBC. So we tried a lot of different things, but together we were desperate. We said, we got to figure this out. And we knew we had messed up, both of ourselves, so we're like, we can't do this ourselves. In fact, we each tried in the early days to launch Hulu on our own. It was a mess. So we're like, we need an outside entrepreneur. One thing led to another. It took us to Jason Kyler, who was coming out of Amazon, and he founded Hulu. If we had done it, the media was calling it Clown Co. at the time, and it would have been Clown Company. Jason made it Hulu. And what did we learn from that? You needed an entrepreneurial mindset. He needed to have all the ability to take the gems from the mothership and reject any of the bureaucracy, the BS, the whatever. I'll give you a couple of examples. We had made this beautiful video player at NBC, spent a lot of money. We're like, Jason, good news, you don't need to invest in a video player. It's like, oh my God, that thing looks like Times Square. I'm not going to use that. We had to write it off. And he had to invest money in creating something that became beautiful. He went without revenue for about a year, made everybody crazy, but he had the right to do that. How do we pay that team in different equity? That made HR crazy. So my job was a lot to protect that team and fight within the mothership of, no, we're going to give them Hulu equity. We're not going to pay them GE stock. So you needed to create space for that challenger brand. You had to have a different set of running rules, and you needed champions willing to kind of take the arrows inside. And I had learned enough from the failure of iVillage that I knew kind of like where to fight and where the trouble was going to be. So in some ways we needed that failure to understand what the success was going to be.
That's great.
And I love that. I mean, Hulu now, just a couple weeks ago, it's still not enough. It's not Netflix, okay? But it's still pretty good. It's not Netflix. But 25 million, I mean, their subscribers are more than Comcast right now. Yay.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, like big company things like Comcast, we sold NBC to Comcast or GE. Comcast and the cable company, cable networks, could have taken Hulu and made it their Netflix killer. Yet Disney's now in the process of acquiring Hulu. They're launching their own streaming. Comcast is launching their own. I don't know. We're all big companies. We keep doing the same thing. We all want to do our own thing. We're going to create our own streaming. We don't want to come together. And so I still feel like as successful as Hulu was from where it came, it could have been so much more.
That's great. Let's open it up. I'll pass the mic around. So,
Hey, hi.
for context, just say name and where you're from too, so people know.
Yeah, sure. Angelo LaRoche from MasterCard. To your point about not really owning change and kind of having that small segment of movement or people, right? I've often heard that when you're working in innovation, it's like banging your head against a wall that won't move. And then the reinforcement is your manager will tell you, well, that's why we hired you for the job.
Yeah.
What is the reminder for you to be motivated to continue to still innovate, knowing that wall might not move, knowing that you have that small effort of change, and being that catalyst towards pushing the company forward?
Get a book too. That was a good question.
Look, I think if the wall never moves, maybe you hit yourself silly. I don't know. Maybe you need to ask yourself, am I being effective? Because hopefully, even if it's small, little, tiny millimeter change, that's what you get excited about. You have to feel some kind of progress, and maybe it's just a small band of people who suddenly go, I see you. I am encouraged by you. I want to contribute. I'm going to be like you. Maybe some of Liesel's here from who we work together. Sometimes the fights we'd have would be because maybe the business unit didn't do it the way that the innovation team said to do it. Those were stupid fights. Move was happening. Call it whatever you want to call it, they're doing it. And so we fought often the wrong fight, so count movement where it's happening. So those would be some of the things, and also be clear about how you define your metrics and your measurements. And often when people say we brought you in here to do that, they don't even know the right metrics to ask. So can you help bring some different measurements? Maybe it's a throughput of ideas. How many ideas did we test in what period of time? How many ideas can we test with the least amount of money? How many people can I engage to ask these questions in a different way? How fast can we get to go from concept to test? So perhaps you just need to also bring them a new kind of way of funding, testing, and measuring what they do. And if they're still doing it the old way, then you're probably not going to move that wall very far. So, I don't know, I got a lot of ideas for you. I'm happy to talk to you separately, but I think it's just finding a few of those merry band of innovators who go, I believe you, and they're going to go seed it in their way, and you just kind of create a little movement. To me, that's what's most encouraging.
Hi, Arianna here from New York Life. One, to the person that didn't give you the job of journalism, sounds like you found a way to tell a story that's touched many more people, right? So that's right. Who's one?
Yeah, I sure remember his name. It's one of those, I called him Mr. Rant, but I don't think that was his name.
But to build on your point of how important it is to tell that story in a way that brings people along, I'd love to hear some of how you balance the amount of time spent crafting and then telling that story to people with doing the actual work. Because that's, Carl and I are here working on a team is very small, and so that's where we constantly struggle with. Like making sure we put in the time for it, we know it's important, and then there's the work builds up.
Yeah, it's the tension, and I felt a bit of a handicap from the work I did because I came to it from marketing in a company that thought marketing is like an advertising department. It's just what you do at the end, and I was saying, no, marketing's like what you do at the beginning. It's where's the market going? We gotta live in the market. It's about the insights. It's the GPS of the organization. So I felt a real, almost a higher hurdle because the story was like, see, you're just telling the story. That's not real. That was always what I had to confront. So I doubled down on making it real. I had to really make it actual. Eco-imagination. It was a beautiful dancing elephant. But we came up with a really tough scorecard back to the metrics. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the amount of money we're going to put in. Here's how we're going to measure it. We're going to get third-party validation to kind of help us see that it's true. We're going to get an advisory board of outsiders. So I tried to bring in other people to help prove that it was real, and fought really hard for action and metrics to show that it was real. At the same time I was doing the story. When we were seeding digital at GE, I feel like I might have pushed a bit too hard I and the teams pushed a bit too hard on the storytelling. We were making the market, and we needed to pause a little bit and put more action against it. So I think you do have to constantly watch out and accept sometimes that maybe your story is ahead of your capability, and that's okay. But if it's too much of a gap, are you going to be able to catch up? And we might have created more of a problem for ourselves. So I do think that's a watch out.
Hi Beth, my name is Shruti. I work at Anheuser-Busch, and reading your book, the principles around 5S and Six Sigma, all of that harken back a lot of parallels to that we kind of stole your GE playbook, I think, at ABI in many ways. What struck me throughout
We
your
stole
book,
from a lot of others. I think it's just
certainly, the playbook is circulated, for better or worse, it's circulated. So what struck me was your candor. So thank you for writing the book, and thank you for being so honest and transparent and open about all sides of your encounters. I think one in particular with Steve Jobs, and you talk about external change and what it means to be a change maker, but I'm sure there was a lot of internal navigation that was happening at that moment, and then your decision to actually stay and go from NBC back to GE at that pivotal moment. Can you talk through a little bit of, as a leader, what you were facing at that time?
Sure, and thanks for reading it. And
One chapter left. I told myself I would finish it before coming today.
well, I'm a value author. I've packed a lot of pages for your money. So a couple things, like I call myself a change maker, but like I don't really make a lot of change. I kind of midwife change maybe. And the truth is, I don't really like a lot of change. I don't like the change that happens to me. And this was a situation that Trudy's talking about that I was at NBC, you know, kind of navigated some of those stories. I talked a lot, it was very tribal at NBC. It was a lot of warring factions, which happens a lot in change. And I had a lot of reason for not liking the job I did. It was one of the toughest jobs I had. I'll give you a good reason. One, I woke up one morning and read page 6 in the New York Post, and any of you who read page 6 know you never want your name there. And it was, my colleagues had said basically, she's so stealth and evil, she'll take out your kidney and you don't even know it's gone. And in hindsight it was a compliment, but at the time it was not. But that was the kind of environment I was in. It was very tribal, and everyone was out to get me. So I had a lot of reason to want to leave NBC. I worked in digital, so I got to know the team at Apple. They called me up and said, hey, would you like to come and talk to us? Next thing you know, I'm talking to Steve Jobs. And I turned the job down. I get another offer from them. I turned it down. Now, if you look at Apple stock versus GE stock, many years later, you realize that was not a very, I didn't imagine forward much in that scenario. But at the end of the day, I felt I was able to be very creative and imaginative at GE, much more than I was at NBC. I also knew, I didn't feel like that was the job for me at Apple. Yet at the same time, I often regretted the chance I never had a chance to work with Steve Jobs, to make myself better. I was conflicted by it. I was very loyal. And I shared it not to say, hey, I had this chance because I was pretty dopey that I didn't take it, but it wasn't the right job for me. And so I think for all of us, it's that strategic filter. Do you have your strategic filter? It applies to you personally. And yeah, you can have some regret sometimes, coulda, shoulda, woulda, but you pick a path and you have to make it work. And so that's why it was important to me to say I knew what I was going to be good at and where I thought the path for me was, and it was staying at GE. History will see if that was a good idea, but anyway, for me it was the right decision.
You're sitting in the front row, so.
Thank you. My name is Keith Reynolds.
Hi, Keith.
I'm an entrepreneur. Started out in the Wild Duck organization at IBM. And for the last 5 years, I've been building owned media properties for companies. And they're an online magazine built on top of a marketing automation system, so audience management. And it takes somebody internally who's willing to be a leader to take on an assignment like that, that's going to put a front window to the company. And yet the leaders I see, to make them a success, they're able to create a WIFM for a bunch of people, and people love to get on board with a winner, right? They create the winner.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your experience of how you created winner projects and how you get all these factions to line up and get behind it?
Well, I'm not sure I always did, to be honest. I mean, I'd say the times I didn't do it was when I'd be like, do it because Jeff says, or this is a corporate thing, and you have to do it. I mean, again, that carrot, the stick works a little bit, but
Yeah, the carrot is with.
when it worked, it was everybody felt they were part of the team, they were part of the vision, and they got to see and shape that vision together. So again, back to that purpose and vision, I think it was clear and we had enough exposure and freedom. I'll give you a good example. There's a woman I worked with the last year I was there, and in the end I started creating these kind of figure it out jobs. They were very entrepreneurial, and long story short, I just said, hey, she came from outside, can you figure out blockchain for us? And you know, a year later, your success will be that other people see it, they want to work with you, and you find some money from other people as well as what we can have. And she did that. So I think it's just creating enough of the vision, giving people the freedom to get out, and there was a clear mandate. So I think anyone has that capability, just do that. Or are they waiting to be told what to do, or they get defeated when they sin. You remember her struggle was, oh, but the research center is already working on blockchain in the beginning, so what am I going to do? Like, you're going to figure out how to work with them. So in some ways, I think it's a good test. I came to think, how do we test our colleagues more in creating some of these? And the best leaders I saw in this were able to do that. They were able to get other people to follow them, to see that vision, to make that part of the team momentum. And I believe a lot of people can do that.
Cool. Thanks.
Hi, Beth. I'm Jared Richardson. I'm
Jared.
from New Zealand, also from Colgate-Palmolive. So the name of your book is Imagine It Forward, and you're obviously very ambitious. So what is your next big ambitious project, or what is your vision for you, for Beth Comstock, moving forward? Have you got one more big thing?
I do, but it's going to be very different. So my ambition for myself is to really kind of just take some time and take some of my own advice. Like, stop, ask, what have I learned to this point? Make room for discovery. I've done that for a company for my whole career. Now it's time to do it for myself. Take some of these things to heart. I'm going to dabble and experiment with different things. I'm looking at, do I do a couple of fellowship, residency kind of things in very different kind of organizations. So I'm doing that for myself. I'm trying to have take the pressure away of having to have the big thing that's shiny and comes with a big title and comes with all that. Can I do that? I don't know. We'll see.
Hi, Beth. My
Hi.
name is Caroline Wasserman. I actually own my own company in the art world called Artful Prints.
What's it called again?
Artful Prints. Thank you so much for being here. So there's a lot of sports analogies about how you make winning a habit, right? And whether it's because fear is a powerful motivator, or you need to get to that first big hurdle before it's a first big win, or because you just got divorced and have a child to support, there's either an innate ambition, but you need to cross the first hurdle, and you make winning a habit,
Yeah.
right? Where you get the confidence, and then you just kind of assume that you can do it, and you have the leaps of imagination that maybe other people don't have.
Yeah.
So I guess, to what degree would you agree that most, however you define successful or leadership position people would fall into that category? And if you're going to be that person, what's the ideal team to surround yourself with, to the extent that you can cherry pick? And if you're in a bigger company, then how do you get the buy-in that you need?
Yeah. Well, it's a really powerful question, and as you're asking, I'm asking, like, am I a winning person? Like, win, you know, Charlie Sheen kind of win. I'm not sure I'm totally that person. I mean, I'm ambitious. I like to be successful. Accomplished is a word that I like. Have liked. I'm not sure it's my word for the future, but I'm not sure it's always winning. I think for me it is better. It is a belief in kind of going after something that's better. So it's more of an entrepreneurial that sometimes you lose sight when it's just the winning piece of it. And I think that's where corporate innovation falls apart a little bit, because we have these very strict definitions of what winning is in companies. I have a sober view, I think, of what companies do a lot in innovation. I think we all dress up the part, hire people like us in the room, but it's really innovation theater. Because we really don't want to do the hard work. And so ultimately you do want to win, you want to grow, maybe grow is your success, but there's a lot of failure that comes before you win. And so what people do is they dress themselves up, they hire people like Jason, hire people like us in our company, we tell ourselves we have the right buzzwords, we're doing it, but we're not willing to do the hard work. So that's kind of my slight difference, is the struggle, the hard work. Winning makes it sound easy. It's the struggle, to me.
Hi Beth, Goche Seskin. I'm a marketer. I work in New Jersey for a B2B company now, but CPG work forever. Been following you for a while, especially since your departure from GE. And this morning you showed up on my feed, of course. Lucky for me. Your upcoming interview on Marie Claire, which made me think I had no idea Marie Claire did interviews.
At work call.
Yeah, yes. I was not aware and was gladly surprised. In there, if I may ask, on the bit of related personal area, you mentioned a few things that felt very close to me in some ways, maybe not in that same scale. You mentioned about some of the changes you went through, and some social friends maybe not being as much there anymore. I should say not social friends, work friends.
Yeah.
And then some of the challenges that came after not having the major team to go get things done and not being able to tell a team to just handle something, etc. But the tenacity that you mentioned at the beginning of your speech or chat here, it was even obvious and apparent in that interview. What are some of the challenges you're feeling? I don't want to even say facing or seeing, but what are some of the challenges you're feeling? And we already see the tenacity, definitely overcoming all of that, but anything you'd like to share with the team here related to that?
Yeah, so the piece she's talking about, I did with my book, Marie Claire just put it out. It's called What to Do When You Lose Your Job. So I left GE a year ago, and it was a leadership change, and kind of out with the old, in with the new. That guy's gone, we've got it again. And I thought I'd be leaving GE. I mean, started the book because I thought I'd be leaving, but still it was more abrupt than I expected, and it was still hard to deal with. I had to leave behind a team I love. I adore these people. I still adore these people. I miss them every day. And some of the things you're mentioning, I mean, as I was putting my book out, I went and called on some of the agencies I had worked with before, but I don't have the big company budget, and I was kind of like what they did at 6:30 when they were like, oh yeah, we forgot to do her contract for today. And they meant well, but they just, and people who you thought were your friends, they don't call you back. And you look for your team. I've had to have a very entrepreneurial year. I've been an entrepreneur on my own, and putting out a book is very entrepreneurial. I had a publisher, but I had to do a lot of it. I think this is a great idea. What do you think? Well, who are you talking to? So all that's really challenged me this year to work through that. I remember it was about this time last year. My husband walked into my desk, and he's like, what are you doing? I had this to-do list, and I thought I'm going to be very creative and artistic. I was taking art classes and getting in touch with my artistic self. And the best I was doing was my to-do list, where I took out my markers, and they were like, today is Wednesday. And it was like, clean my desk, organize my files. He's like, why do you need a to-do list? And he was like, yeah, my aspiration should be a to-do less list. But I was programmed. It's taken me a year to realize how programmed I am. And I jumped right back in. That's what that article kind of called me out on a little bit, was you say you're going to go off and do this discovery, but you jumped right back into this crazy rhythm, and she was kind of calling me on it a bit. And so I think that's one of the things for all of us when you're in the midst of change. You really do have to change your mindset, change the way you work. It's taken me a year to kind of get my head around that. And we'll see if we'll talk a year from now and you can hold me accountable.
Good. Tina, and then one more on the round.
Hi, Beth. Tina Nathanson. Hi, Angela. Former MasterCard, former GE. I was there 99 to 2008. So I saw you. Anyway, my question is, I saw you from afar, and I also saw you speak at the TMRE last year in Phoenix. It was great, very inspiring. And I'm currently in transition now. So, since you've written a book, what books are you reading instead of writing right now?
Yeah, I love books. I love reading books. I just finished *Sapiens*. I had started. Now I finally had time to finish it. Business books. Well, that's kind of a business book. Of the ones, I'm a big fan of, this is an oldie, but Twyla Tharp's Creative Habit. I love that book. I recommend it any chance I get. It's about the practices of creativity, and you can learn a lot from that. I really like Kim Scott's Radical Candor as a way for all of us, if you're in a company, you need that feedback loop, and how do you navigate and give people feedback? The baby's ugly, the project's not going to work, you're not collaborating. High level, low level, so I find that one's really helpful for people in companies navigating. I'm trying to think in terms of transition if I've read any. I'm sure I'll think of something. And then my other trick for reading is I still believe in fiction. I love fiction. I have a practice of reading classic fiction and modern fiction. And then I just finished Crime and Punishment, which I hadn't read before. It really touched me. It was really a good one to read.
One final question and we'll wrap.
Hi. I'm Kasha. I'm actually a GE alumni. You mentioned that you were the person that outsider that would bring things into the internal team.
Yeah.
I would be interested to, since you were the sniffer, sniffing around and seeing new trends emerging, what are you seeing right now that you can share with us? Bring it to us.
Yeah. Well, I should ask all of you that, because you're in the middle of, most of you are in the middle of this in the companies you work for. It's usually one of the questions I love to ask people when I meet them. What new trends are you seeing? What insights do you have? Hopefully that's part of your practice of the questions you ask. I spent some time last year, surprisingly, with some agriculture tech folks. I'm really intrigued about ag tech. I know we've got Unilever here, and I think just what's happening to feed us. I think plant-based food is not only, it's arrived, but I think it's only going to grow. We're seeing what's happening with marijuana. We're seeing that's happening in the medicinal space. So I think there's a whole, sort of that whole world is taking off. I've been really impressed as I did my entrepreneurial year, my hustle year. There are a lot of people in the world who work for big companies who have their side hustles and side gigs and whatever you want to call it. I bet today there are people on your team who on the weekends are social media managers doing innovation for a startup, and you probably don't know about it. And I bet my own colleagues are doing it and I didn't know about it. So this notion of professional fluidity and how do we define ourselves with multiple hats and multiple titles is real. It's not just a thing if you're a millennial. I think it's from all of us professionally. And so what are big companies doing to that? I know whatever I do going forth, it's going to have multiple things that I want to do. And maybe that's why I stayed in the role I had at G, because I could do that a little bit. But I see that professional fluidity as something. We talk about future of work like it's robots. I think that's an interesting future to contemplate. And then along those lines, just the need and the demand for more creative thinking in the world. For every data scientist, 10 data scientists we hire, are we hiring a creative strategist? We're seeing the consequences of not thinking forward. Who are the activists for the future? Where are they? Like, let's start a movement. Come on, you guys, what are we doing? We're seeing what's happened for companies that haven't done that. So I do think creativity and strategy and the things that we're all dedicated to here, we have to force that being part of our future trend. And I'm encouraged what Glassdoor had a survey they released today. I was happy to see that like marketing manager was, I think, the top 3 job for the next 5 years. So I was encouraged by that.
You have a room full of amazing, courageous change makers who obviously are doing crazy, cool things or making an impact. Like, what advice, wisdom, encouragement would you leave them with?
Well, you're here talking about courageous minds, and I think you have to find the courage from somewhere. It's little bits of little doses of courage you're putting in your pocket, so you can take out. And we're not talking like bold Elon Musk, I'm going to fly to Mars courage. You're talking, I got to go pitch an idea and go back again another day. And you've got to give other people that courage. So not only are you giving it to yourself, but you're storing it in your pocket and you're giving it to other people. You're giving them feedback, you're giving them space, you're giving them encouragement. So I think courage and courageous minds are something that can be shared and cultivated. So that's your job. Your job is to inspire, to fight for, and encourage other courageous minds.
That's great, Beth. Help you give her a round of applause.
Thanks, Kristen.
As we talked before we kicked off, like, would love for you guys, my hope is as you reflect on the conversation that happened tonight and that you make a commitment tomorrow to figure out what am I going to do differently. Could be something small, could be big change, but what's the thing you're going to do starting tomorrow and start to make it happen. We've never had a sponsor for one of the Courageous Minds Only chats, but when Jenna said, hey, do you guys want some free beer? Like, we were like, sure. So thank you to Jenna Lally and the Blue Point Brewing Company. Giving us some free beer. Good synergy with Courageous Minds Only in my book, so that's great. But seriously, like, really reflect on what you heard tonight and make a personal commitment to yourself to drive that forward. So amazing night. Appreciate you guys being here. Our next one is going to be March 20th. Details TBD for sure, but mark your calendars and we'll definitely let you guys know details. We can be in here till about 8:30, so it's 8:05. Would encourage you guys to stick around to meet people if you haven't talked to. You would definitely encourage people to do that. And then if you guys haven't picked up Beth's book, it's amazing. Sarah from our team, we bought 30 copies and we all read it and we went through did a lunch and learn with it. It's really, really good. A lot of good stuff.
An audio book at 1.75 speed, get there really fast.
My team makes fun of me because I do 2.5x or something. It actually is cool hearing you read it. But I'm serious, it's really, really good. So I would encourage you guys to pick it up. But stick around till 8:30. Connect. Remember March 20th. I just appreciate you guys being here and investing in yourselves. So have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.